Good evening and welcome. Tonight, you do not have to solve anything. You do not have to answer emails, finish homework, or worry about tomorrow's alarm. For the next little while, you only have one job: get comfortable, maybe pull up a blanket, maybe turn down the lights just a little, and if you happen to fall asleep somewhere along the way, well, that would actually mean this video is doing exactly what it was meant to do. Now, take one slow breath. Imagine that the earth below you is becoming smaller, not because anything bad happened. Not because you're running away, just because you're going on a very, very long trip. The blue oceans slowly blend together. The clouds become soft white swirls. Mountains disappear. Cities become tiny dots of light. Soon, the whole planet fits inside one window of a quiet spaceship. It is strange, isn't it? Everything you have ever known. Every kingdom, every forest, every football match, every cup of tea, every loud neighbor, all sitting on one small blue marble floating through endless darkness. And somehow we're leaving it behind. Don't worry, we'll come back, probably. Our destination tonight is Mars, that small reddish light that has watched humans for thousands of years. People have looked up at Mars long before they had telescopes. They saw a bright red star that moved differently from the others. It wandered across the night sky. Ancient people gave it names, created stories about it, and wondered what kind of place could glow with that mysterious color. Some believed it belonged to gods. Some believed it was a sign. Some probably looked at it and thought, that one seems suspicious. Humans have always been curious. Give us one strange light in the sky, and we'll spend the next few thousand years making theories about it. Sometimes those theories are brilliant, sometimes not so much. But that curiosity never really disappears. It quietly follows us from one generation to another, and Mars has always been one of its favorite destinations. Long before rockets existed, people imagined walking across the red world. They imagined strange cities, hidden civilizations, giant canals, mysterious creatures, and adventures beyond anything possible on Earth. Of course, today we know Mars is not exactly filled with little green people waiting to invite us over for dinner. That would have made space travel much more exciting, and probably much more awkward. Still, Mars has never stopped capturing our imagination. What's fascinating is that this dream wasn't only found in Europe or America, it also lived in Bengal. Many decades before modern Mars missions became reality, Bengali writers were already sending characters across space. Science fiction became a playground where impossible ideas suddenly felt possible. One of the great names was Pramendra Mitra *, whose famous character Ganada often told unbelievable stories involving science, exploration, and distant worlds. Whether every one of Ganada's adventures actually happened, well, that depends on how much you trust someone who always has the most incredible story in the room. Then there was Adrish Bardhan *, one of the pioneers of Bengali science fiction, who helped build a whole community of readers dreaming about space travel. Even younger readers grew up with stories where planets, rockets, and strange civilizations felt surprisingly close. These writers didn't have photographs from Mars, no high-resolution satellite maps, no robot selfies, no helicopters flying through thin Martian air. They mostly had imagination, and somehow imagination was enough. That is one of my favorite things about science fiction. Sometimes the technology arrives many years later, but the dream arrives first. A writer sits quietly at a desk, a few sheets of paper, a simple pen. Outside, maybe it's raining. Inside, someone is already walking on another planet. Years later, engineers look at those same dreams and quietly begin asking, what if we actually build it? What if this isn't impossible? Little by little, fiction becomes engineering. Engineering becomes science. Science becomes history. And history begins with a dream that sounded ridiculous. Mars is full of those dreams. Even today, when spacecraft regularly visit the planet, Mars still feels mysterious. We've mapped huge volcanoes taller than any mountain on Earth. We've discovered valleys stretching for thousands of kilometers. We've found frozen water hidden beneath the surface. We've watched dust storms grow so enormous that they cover almost the entire planet. Yet every answer seems to create two more questions. That's the funny thing about exploration. You never really finish, you simply discover how much you still don't know. Imagine standing there, the sky isn't blue. Instead, it has a soft reddish color, almost as if the whole world is painted with gentle sunset light. The ground is dusty, the air is incredibly thin, it is quiet, very quiet, no birds, no insects. No trees moving in the wind, only the occasional whisper of Martian dust drifting across ancient rocks. Some people might find that lonely, others might find it peaceful. For tonight, let's choose peaceful. Our spaceship moves silently through space. No loud engines, no dramatic movie explosions. Space is surprisingly calm. Outside the window, stars no longer seem to twinkle. Without Earth's atmosphere, they shine steadily, like tiny lamps placed carefully across an endless black ocean. Somewhere ahead is Mars. Still small, still distant, but slowly growing larger. As we travel, think about all the people who have looked toward that tiny red light. Ancient astronomers, kings, sailors, poets, teachers. Children lying on rooftops during warm summer nights. Scientists carrying notebooks. Writers filling blank pages with impossible adventures. They all shared something very simple: curiosity. That quiet feeling that whispers, "I wonder what's over there." Maybe that's one of the most human feelings we have. We build boats because we wonder what's beyond the sea. We climb mountains because we wonder what's beyond the clouds. We build rockets because eventually, we wonder what's beyond the sky. Mars became the next chapter of that question. Not because it was easy, not because it was close, but because it was there, waiting, patiently, for millions and millions of years. The planet didn't hurry us. It simply kept orbiting the sun, quietly glowing red each night, while humanity slowly learned mathematics, built telescopes, invented engines, discovered electricity, created computers, and finally learned how to leave its home world. Mars waited through all of it. That feels strangely polite, as if the planet looked at humanity and said, "No rush, take your time, I'll still be here." And here we are. Our journey is only beginning. In the chapters ahead, we'll slowly explore how humans first tried to understand Mars, why they believed strange things about it, how early science mixed with wild imagination, and how tiny robots eventually became our eyes and hands on another world. We'll meet dreamers, inventors, astronomers, and machines that traveled hundreds of millions of kilometers just to send back a single photograph. Not bad for a bunch of clever humans living on one tiny blue planet, but for now, our spaceship keeps drifting forward. Earth grows smaller behind us. Mars becomes just a little brighter ahead. The stars remain silent. The journey has begun, and there is no need to rush. We have all night. Our little spaceship keeps moving. Earth is now a tiny blue dot behind us. Mars is still far away, but it looks a little bigger than before. Not close enough to visit, just close enough to keep us curious. And maybe that is the perfect way to think about Mars. For most of human history, nobody could touch it. Nobody could visit it. Nobody could even see its surface. All people had was a small red light in the night sky. Yet somehow that tiny red light managed to fill thousands of years of stories, dreams, and questions. It is honestly impressive. If Mars had a fan club, humans have been members for at least 5,000 years. Let's begin in ancient Egypt. Thousands of years ago, long before cameras, clocks, or space rockets, Egyptian priests watched the sky almost every night. The stars were not just beautiful to them, they were useful. The movement of the heavens helped them measure time, predict seasons, and prepare for the flooding of the Nile River. Their lives depended on paying attention to the sky. Among the wandering lights, one stood out: Mars. Unlike the stars, which stayed in fixed patterns, Mars slowly moved across the sky. Night after night, it changed its position. That made it special. The Egyptians carefully recorded these movements. They wrote observations that helped later astronomers understand how the heavens behaved. Of course, they did not know Mars was another planet like Earth. To them, it was a mysterious heavenly object with its own path and meaning. Imagine trying to understand the solar system without a telescope. That is a bit like trying to solve a giant puzzle while someone forgot to include most of the pieces. Still, they did surprisingly well. As centuries passed, people in ancient Greece became just as interested. Greek thinkers loved asking questions, sometimes very big questions. What is the universe made of? Why do planets move? What holds everything together? Also probably. Who forgot to bring lunch? The Greeks noticed something strange. Most stars stayed in the same patterns. Mars did not. It wandered. The Greek word planets actually means wanderer. That is where our modern word planet comes from. At the time, people believed Earth stood still at the center of everything. The sun moved around Earth, the moon moved around Earth, and Mars also seemed to circle Earth. Today we know that idea was wrong, but based on what they could see with their own eyes, it made perfect sense. Sometimes science is not about being wrong. It is simply about working with the best information you have. Later, the Romans inherited many Greek ideas, but gave them their own style. And when they looked at Mars, they noticed something impossible to ignore. Its color. Mars glowed with a reddish light, not bright red, more like the color of rust or glowing embers in a campfire. To Roman eyes, that color looked like blood, and blood reminded them of battle. So they connected the planet with their god of war, Mars. That is why the planet still carries that name today. Interestingly, Mars was not always seen as a cruel or evil god. The Romans also believed he protected farms, families, and the Roman people. Only later did he become known mainly as the fierce god of war. Still, the red color was impossible to ignore. Humans are very good at making stories from colors. A red planet must be about war. A bright morning star, probably something magical. A funny-shaped cloud definitely looks like a giant rabbit. Our brains enjoy finding meaning, even when nature is simply being nature. Meanwhile, far from the Mediterranean world, another great tradition of astronomy was growing. In ancient India, scholars carefully studied the movements of planets for many centuries. Indian astronomy combined careful observation, mathematics, and deep curiosity about the universe. Mars became known as *Mangala. In many traditions, Mangala was linked with strength, courage, energy, and action. Because of its reddish color, Mars was also connected with fire and power. These ideas later became part of Indian astrology, where Mangala still plays an important role in many birth charts today. But ancient Indian scholars did much more than create stories. They observed. They calculated, they measured. Books like the Surya Siddhanta written many centuries ago, contain surprisingly advanced ideas about planetary motion. Indian astronomers developed mathematical methods that helped predict where planets would appear in the sky. No satellites, no computers, no smartphone app reminding them when Mars would rise. Just careful observation, patience, and mathematics. That is pretty amazing. Across China, Babylon, and many other ancient civilizations, people also watched Mars closely. Each culture gave it different meanings. Some saw warnings, others saw blessings. Some believed it influenced kings, others thought it affected harvests or the future of nations. Looking back today, it is easy to smile at some of these beliefs, but we should also remember something important. Ancient people were trying to explain a mysterious universe using only their eyes and their minds. That takes courage. Imagine standing under a perfectly dark sky with no electric lights anywhere. Thousands upon thousands of stars shine above you. Mars quietly glows among them. You have no telescope, no science textbook, no internet, no astronaut to ask. You simply watch, night after night. Year after year, slowly patterns begin to appear. Questions become ideas. Ideas become stories. Stories become traditions. That is how myths are born. And myths are not always about finding the correct answer. Sometimes they help people make sense of things that feel impossible to understand. A bright red object crossing the heavens could easily become a symbol of battle, or courage, or danger, or change. Different cultures saw different meanings because each culture viewed the universe through its own experiences. That is one of the beautiful things about human history. We all looked at the same planet, yet we imagined completely different worlds. Mars became a mirror. It reflected whatever people believed was most important: war, power, strength, mystery, hope. Even fear, the planet itself stayed exactly the same. Only our stories changed, and those stories mattered, because long before engineers built rockets, storytellers built curiosity. Before scientists measured Mars, poets imagined it. Before telescopes revealed its deserts, myths filled them with gods, heroes, and strange kingdoms. Without those early dreams, perhaps fewer people would have wanted to study the sky. Curiosity often begins with a simple story. Then someone asks, could this be true? That question changes everything. Little by little, myths give way to observation. Observation leads to science. Science leads to discovery. But the old stories never completely disappear. Even today, when we know Mars is a cold desert covered with dust and rocks, calling it the Red Planet still feels magical. The nickname carries thousands of years of human imagination. It reminds us that before Mars became a destination for spacecraft, it was first a destination for dreams. Our spaceship continues its quiet journey. The stars remain bright. Mars grows just a little larger in the window. Soon, we will meet the people who stopped guessing and started measuring. They built better tools. They looked closer than anyone before them. And what they thought they saw on Mars would inspire one of the greatest misunderstandings in the history of astronomy. But that is a story for the next part of our journey. For now, let the ancient skies fade gently into the darkness as we drift peacefully toward the little red world that has fascinated humanity for thousands of years. Our journey continues. The stars outside our little spaceship have not changed much. They are still calm, still silent, and still in no hurry at all. Mars, however, is getting bigger. Not huge yet, but no longer just a tiny red dot. For thousands of years, people could only guess what was up there. Then one invention changed everything: the telescope. It may not look very exciting today. Compared to giant space telescopes and powerful satellites, the first telescopes were simple little tubes with pieces of glass inside. But they completely changed the way humans looked at the universe. Suddenly, the sky was no longer just a beautiful painting. It became a place waiting to be explored. One of the first people to point a telescope toward the heavens was Galileo Galilei*. In 1609, Galileo began using a telescope to study the night sky. His telescope was tiny compared to modern ones. By today's standards, even a pair of decent binoculars might do a better job. Still, it was enough to start a scientific revolution. When Galileo looked toward Mars, he saw something no human had seen before. Not a god, not a magical red star, a tiny disk. It was incredibly small and blurry, but it was enough to show that Mars was a real world, not just a point of light, a place. That simple discovery changed everything. Imagine looking through a blurry window and realizing that what you thought was a distant lamp is actually an entire city. That is the kind of feeling Galileo must have had. Of course, he could not see mountains or valleys. His telescope simply was not powerful enough. Mars still kept most of its secrets, but the door had been opened. Over the next 200 years, telescope makers became better. Lenses improved, mirrors became larger, astronomers became more patient, and Mars slowly revealed a few more details. People noticed dark patches on its surface, bright white areas near the poles. Sometimes those white caps became larger, sometimes they became smaller. Today we know they are made mostly of frozen water and frozen carbon dioxide. Back then, nobody knew. Every new observation created another mystery. Then came one of the most famous moments in the history of Mars. In 1877, an Italian astronomer named Giovanni Schiaparelli was carefully studying the planet during a time when Mars and Earth were especially close together. This gave him one of the clearest views anyone had ever seen. As he looked through his telescope, he noticed long, thin markings crossing the surface. He called them canali. Now here is where language decided to play one of the biggest practical jokes in science. In Italian, canali means channels or natural grooves. But when the word was translated into English, many people used the word canals. That one little translation changed history. Because canals are not natural, people build canals. Think of the Suez Canal or the Panama Canal. If Mars had canals, someone must have built them. Suddenly, newspapers became very excited. Readers became even more excited, and somewhere, Mars was probably wondering why everyone was talking about it. The idea spread quickly. Maybe Mars had an advanced civilization. Maybe intelligent beings had built giant waterways across the planet. Maybe they were trying to move water from the frozen poles to the dry deserts. It sounded incredible. It also sounded just believable enough. That is often how famous ideas begin, not completely impossible, just possible enough to capture everyone's imagination. Then another man entered the story. An American astronomer named Percival Lowell Lowell became completely fascinated by Mars. You could even say he was a little obsessed. Well, maybe more than a little. He built a large observatory in Arizona mainly to study the red planet. Night after night, he looked through his telescope. The more he observed, the more convinced he became that the canals were real. Not only that, he believed they formed a huge network stretching across the planet. According to Lowell, Mars was an old world slowly drying out. Its intelligent inhabitants were desperately building massive canals to carry precious water from the polar ice caps to cities near the equator. It was a dramatic story, a dying planet. Brilliant engineers, a civilization fighting against nature itself. Honestly, it sounds like the beginning of a science fiction movie. The public loved it. Books were written. Newspapers printed exciting articles. People imagined wise Martians watching Earth through giant telescopes. Artists painted beautiful cities under pink skies. Children dreamed about visiting another world. Mars had become more than a planet. It had become a place filled with possibilities. There was just one small problem. The evidence was not very strong. Other astronomers looked through their own telescopes. Some claimed they saw canals too. Others saw nothing at all. The lines appeared and disappeared. Sometimes they looked straight. Sometimes they looked curved. Sometimes they seemed to multiply. It became very confusing. Today, scientists think many of these canals were tricks of the human eye. The telescopes of the time were still limited. Mars looked tiny. The atmosphere above Earth blurred the image, and the human brain naturally connects small blurry spots into straight lines. You have probably done something similar yourself. Have you ever looked at clouds and seen a dragon, or a rabbit, or maybe a giant potato wearing sunglasses? The clouds never actually looked exactly like that. Your brain simply enjoys finding patterns. Astronomers are human too. Sometimes the brain fills in details that are not really there. Science slowly began correcting itself. As better telescopes appeared, the famous canals became harder and harder to find. Photographs showed no giant engineering projects, no enormous waterways, no massive Martian cities. Lowell had been honest about what he believed he saw. But believing something and proving it are two different things. That is one of the greatest strengths of science. Science allows itself to be corrected. It does not say, I must always be right. Instead, it says, show me better evidence. Sometimes that evidence changes everything. Still, even though Lowell's ideas turned out to be wrong, they had an enormous impact. His books inspired writers all over the world. One of them was H.G. Wells, whose famous novel The War of the Worlds imagined intelligent Martians invading Earth. The story became one of the greatest science fiction classics ever written. Later, radio dramas, comic books, movies, and television shows continued filling Mars with strange creatures. Some Martians looked friendly, some looked terrifying, some had giant brains. Some had tentacles. Apparently, Earth has always believed that if something lives in space, it probably needs extra arms. Poor aliens never get a normal design. By the early 20th century, Mars had become one of the biggest stars in popular culture. People spoke about it with excitement. Children imagined flying there. Scientists argued over observations. Writers created adventures that stretched across the solar system, all because of a few blurry lines seen through telescopes. Looking back today, it is easy to laugh a little. But those mistakes helped keep curiosity alive. Without them, perhaps fewer people would have cared about Mars, and without curiosity, there would have been fewer missions, fewer discoveries, fewer dreams. As our spaceship quietly moves closer to the red planet, we leave behind the age of guesses made through glass lenses. Soon, a new generation of explorers will decide that looking from Earth is no longer enough. Instead of watching Mars through a telescope, they will go there, not with people, not yet, but with brave little machines that will travel across millions of kilometers of empty space just to answer one simple question: what is Mars really like? That answer, as we will soon discover, is both more ordinary and far more amazing than anyone expected. Our spaceship keeps floating through the quiet darkness. Mars is no longer just a tiny red spark. It has become a small world hanging in front of us, still far away, but close enough that our imagination begins to fill in the details. Funny enough, imagination has always traveled faster than rockets. Long before humans sent machines to Mars, writers had already landed there many times. And if we are talking about imagination, especially in Bengal, there is one name we simply cannot skip: Satyajit Ray. Most people around the world know Ray as one of the greatest filmmakers ever. His movies are calm, thoughtful, and beautifully human. Directors across the globe admired his work, and many still do today. But there was another side of Satyajit Ray that many people, especially outside Bengal, do not know as well. He loved science. He loved mystery. And he absolutely loved asking, what if? That simple question became the heart of many of his stories. Ray grew up in a family where art, books, and ideas were everywhere. His grandfather, Upendrakishore Ray Chowdhury, loved printing technology, music, and science. His father, Sukumar Ray filled children's books with clever humor and endless imagination. So curiosity almost seemed to run in the family. Imagine growing up in a house where books are everywhere, people are discussing strange ideas, and creativity feels as normal as eating breakfast. That was quite a good place for a future storyteller. As Ray became older, he developed another interest: the stars. He enjoyed reading about astronomy and new scientific discoveries. He kept up with the latest ideas from around the world. While many people enjoyed science only in classrooms, Ray enjoyed turning science into adventures. He believed that learning could also be entertaining. After all, who says education has to wear a serious face all the time? Sometimes it can smile a little. Sometimes it can even tell a joke. That idea became very clear in one of his most famous creations, Professor Shanku. If you have ever read Bengali science fiction, there is a good chance you have met this extraordinary scientist. Professor Trilokshwar Shanku is brilliant. He invents impossible machines. He travels across the world. Sometimes he travels beyond the world. He meets strange creatures, mysterious civilizations, and scientific puzzles that seem impossible to solve. Unlike many action heroes, Professor Shanku rarely solves problems by fighting. He uses his brain, which, if you think about it, is a pretty useful invention. Ray filled these stories with real science mixed carefully with imagination. He never treated science as boring facts. Instead, science became a doorway to adventure. Readers did not always notice they were learning because they were too busy enjoying the story. That is probably one of the best teaching tricks ever invented. If someone finishes a story and accidentally learns something, mission accomplished. Around the same time, Bengali science fiction itself was becoming stronger. Of course, Ray was not the first. As we mentioned earlier, writers like Pramendra Mitra had already introduced readers to exciting scientific adventures. His famous storyteller, Ganada, could somehow survive almost anything. Whether it was dangerous jungles, mysterious laboratories, or impossible missions, Ganada always seemed to have another unbelievable tale ready. People often wondered, is he telling the truth? Probably not, but that was part of the fun. Then writers like Adrish Bardhan helped build an entire community around Bengali science fiction. Magazines began publishing stories about robots, distant planets, future technology, and life beyond Earth. Young readers waited eagerly for the next issue. Remember, this was happening long before smartphones, long before YouTube, long before someone could ask an AI about Mars at 2 in the morning while eating biscuits. Books were the gateway to other worlds, and what wonderful gateways they were. Science fiction gave readers permission to dream. One story imagined life on another planet. Another imagined incredible machines. Another explored strange discoveries buried beneath ancient deserts. Some ideas turned out to be impossible. Others slowly became reality. Think about this. When these writers imagined space travel, humans had not even walked on the moon. Mars was still only a tiny reddish dot. Nobody had seen clear pictures of its surface. Nobody knew exactly what was waiting there. That uncertainty gave writers enormous freedom. Every blank space became an invitation. Every mystery became another chapter. One of the beautiful things about Bengali science fiction is that it often mixed wonder with logic. The stories encouraged readers to ask questions. Could this invention really work? How far away is Mars? Could life exist somewhere else? What happens if gravity is different? Questions are powerful. Science begins with questions, not answers. Every great discovery starts when someone quietly says, "I wonder." Children do this naturally. Adults sometimes forget. Good science fiction reminds us how to wonder again. It reminds us that curiosity is not childish. It is one of humanity's greatest strengths. In many ways, these stories prepared young minds for the future. A child reading about rockets in the 1960s might become an engineer 20 years later. Someone fascinated by imaginary robots might grow up designing real machines. A reader dreaming about Mars could someday help build a spacecraft. Dreams have a funny habit of becoming careers. Of course, not every reader became a scientist. Many simply became lifelong lovers of learning, and that is just as important, because science belongs to everyone. You do not need a laboratory to be curious, you only need a question. As space exploration entered a new age, real discoveries slowly caught up with fiction. Space agencies began launching probes, powerful telescopes improved, computers became faster. Engineers solved problems that once sounded impossible. The gap between imagination and reality became smaller each year. Sometimes reality even became stranger than fiction. Imagine telling readers in the 1950s that one day a small helicopter would actually fly on Mars. They might have smiled politely, then asked if you needed some fresh air. Yet that unbelievable idea became real. That is the wonderful relationship between science fiction and science. One inspires, the other investigates. One dreams, the other builds. Neither works quite as well without the other. And that brings us to this documentary. This journey is inspired by that same spirit of curiosity. By the storytellers who looked toward the night sky and saw more than distant lights. They saw possibilities. They reminded us that every great adventure begins with a question, not an answer. Tonight we are following in their footsteps, not by inventing wild stories, but by exploring the real history of humanity's relationship with Mars. Along the way, we will still leave room for wonder. Because facts and wonder can travel together quite nicely, our spaceship continues its slow and peaceful path through the darkness. The red planet is growing larger now. Soon, we will leave behind the age of imagination alone. The next chapter begins when humans finally decide that dreaming about Mars is no longer enough. It is time to send something there. Tiny machines, big hopes, and the beginning of one of the greatest adventures in the history of exploration. Our quiet journey continues. Outside the window, Mars is no longer just a distant red light. It has become a real world. You can almost imagine the dusty plains waiting patiently below, as if the planet has been expecting visitors for a very long time. But before anyone can step onto another planet, there is one small detail. You actually have to get there, and that turns out to be much harder than packing a suitcase and booking a flight. There are no direct flights to Mars, no airport lounges, no tiny bags of peanuts, and definitely no pilot saying, "Ladies and gentlemen, we are just 30 minutes away from Mars." The weather is cold, dusty, and there is almost no air to breathe. That would be quite the announcement. A journey to Mars would be the greatest peaceful expedition in human history. Think about all the great voyages from the past. People crossed oceans without knowing what waited on the other side. Explorers sailed into waters that had never been mapped. Some climbed the highest mountains, others reached the deepest parts of the sea. Each journey pushed the limits of what humans thought was possible. Mars would take that idea to a completely different level. Instead of crossing an ocean, we would cross space itself. Millions of kilometers with nothing outside except stars, sunlight, and endless darkness. It sounds exciting. It is also a little intimidating. So where do we begin with the people? Choosing astronauts for a Mars mission would not be as simple as finding the strongest or the fastest person. This is not a race. It is more like finding people who can stay calm even when everything around them feels strange. Imagine living inside a spacecraft for many months. The same small rooms, the same faces. The same walls, no fresh breeze, no coffee shop around the corner, no weekend trip to visit family, and no chance of saying, "I think I'll just go outside for 5 minutes." Outside is space. Space is not very friendly to people without a spacecraft. Astronauts already train for difficult missions on the International Space Station, but Mars would ask even more from them. They would need to be healthy, strong, smart, patient, and perhaps most importantly, good teammates, because during a long mission, even tiny disagreements can become big problems. Imagine someone who always leaves empty food packets floating around the cabin, or someone who keeps forgetting where they left the space screwdriver. After the 10th time, even the nicest astronaut might start giving them the look. Living together peacefully would be just as important as knowing how to repair a machine. That is why astronauts spend years training together. They learn how each person reacts under pressure. They practice solving problems. They learn to trust one another completely. Trust is not built overnight. It grows slowly, just like friendship. Next comes the equipment. A Mars mission would need everything carefully planned. Every object inside the spacecraft would have a purpose. Food, water, medical supplies, computers, scientific tools, space suits, replacement parts, emergency equipment. Even the smallest item must earn its place. On Earth, if you forget something important, you can usually buy another one. On Mars, the nearest shop is a few 100 million kilometers away. Delivery might take a while. Engineers think about everything. How much oxygen will the crew need? How much water? Can some of the water be recycled? Can waste be turned into something useful? Can food last for years without going bad? Every kilogram matters. The heavier the spacecraft, the more fuel it needs. So engineers become experts at asking one simple question. Do we really need this? Sometimes the answer is yes. Sometimes the answer is no. And sometimes the answer is, maybe we don't need 3 different kinds of space spoons. Inside the spacecraft, life would become surprisingly simple. Each astronaut would have a small sleeping area, not a big bedroom, just enough space for privacy. There would be places to exercise every day because muscles become weaker in weightlessness. Without gravity, the human body starts behaving in unusual ways. Bones slowly lose strength, muscles shrink. Even the heart does not have to work quite as hard. Your body basically says, oh, gravity has gone on holiday. Exercise helps keep everything working properly. Astronauts on long missions already spend around 2 hours every day exercising. Not because they want impressive beach muscles. There are no beaches on the way to Mars. They exercise because their bodies need it. Meals would also be different. Forget giant pizzas delivered to your door. Food must be lightweight, nutritious, and easy to store. Some meals are freeze-dried. Others are specially prepared before launch. Scientists are even studying ways astronauts could grow small amounts of fresh vegetables during long missions. Imagine eating the first lettuce ever grown on the way to Mars. It might become the most famous salad in history. Entertainment would also matter. Humans cannot work every minute of every day. People need music, books, movies, games, conversations. Maybe someone brings a guitar. Maybe someone tells terrible jokes. Every crew seems to have at least one person whose jokes are, let's say, unforgettable, mostly because nobody laughs. Even simple things become special. Watching Earth through a window, celebrating birthdays, sharing stories from home, looking at old family photos. These small moments help people feel connected to the world they left behind. Then comes one of the biggest challenges of all, the mind. A journey to Mars could take many months each way. That is a long time to live inside a metal spacecraft. Psychologists study how people react in isolated environments. Researchers even run experiments where volunteers spend months inside special habitats on Earth. These places are designed to feel similar to deep space missions. The volunteers live together, work together, eat together, and sometimes get a little tired of seeing the same 4 people every single day. That is perfectly normal. Humans are social, but we also enjoy variety. Astronauts learn ways to manage stress. They keep daily routines, exercise regularly, talk openly about problems, take time to relax. A calm mind can be just as valuable as advanced technology. Communication with Earth would also become very different. When astronauts travel to the moon, messages arrive almost instantly. Mars is much farther away. Depending on where the planets are, a simple message could take several minutes to arrive. A reply could take several more. you cannot have a normal phone conversation. Imagine asking, "Can you help us fix this?" then waiting 20 minutes for the answer. That means astronauts must become even more independent. They need to solve many problems themselves. That is another reason why training is so important. By the time they leave Earth, they must already know what to do in hundreds of different situations. Because once the journey begins, there is no turning around easily. Yet despite all these challenges, people continue preparing. Why? Because exploration has always been part of being human. Every generation finds a new horizon, the next mountain, the next ocean, the next planet. Mars is simply our newest horizon. As our imaginary spacecraft glides peacefully through the darkness, everything feels quiet. The engines hum softly. The crew moves through weightlessness with slow, gentle motions. Earth is now only a bright blue star behind us. Home feels very far away. Ahead, Mars grows larger with every passing day. The greatest peaceful voyage in history is no longer just a dream. It has become a plan, and very soon our long journey through space will truly begin. The day has finally arrived. After years of planning, thousands of engineers, millions of tiny calculations, endless checklists, and enough cups of coffee to fill a small lake, the mission is ready. Our journey to Mars is about to begin. Take a deep breath and imagine standing near the launch pad. It is early morning. The sky is still painted with soft colors as the sun slowly rises over the horizon. In front of you stands the tallest machine you have ever seen, the rocket. It looks almost peaceful. White, shiny, and completely still, but everyone knows that in just a little while, it will become one of the loudest things on Earth. Around the launch pad, people work quietly. Engineers check the same numbers one last time. Technicians inspect every connection. Computers run through thousands of final tests. Nobody wants surprises today. Especially the kind that involve rockets. Inside the spacecraft, the astronauts are already sitting in their seats. They have trained for this moment for years. Every movement feels familiar. Every switch has been practiced hundreds of times. Even so, today feels different. Practice is over. This is real. The countdown begins. 10, 9, 8. The voices inside mission control stay calm. Outside, the giant rocket waits without making a sound. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. At first, there is only light, then comes the fire. A huge cloud of bright orange flames bursts beneath the rocket. A second later comes the sound. Actually, not just sound, a deep rumble that shakes the ground itself. It is so powerful that you feel it in your chest. The rocket slowly begins to rise, very slowly at first. Almost as if it is thinking, "Am I really doing this?" Then little by little it climbs faster. The launch tower slips away. The ground becomes smaller. The blue sky stretches above. For the astronauts inside, the ride is anything but smooth. They are pushed back into their seats by powerful acceleration. Speaking becomes harder. Even lifting an arm takes effort. The rocket keeps climbing, higher, faster. The atmosphere becomes thinner. The sky changes color. Bright blue slowly becomes deep blue, then dark blue, then black. It is one of the strangest sights any human can experience. The sun still shines brightly, but the sky around it is completely dark. No daytime blue, no clouds, only space. A few minutes later, the rocket reaches orbit. The engines shut down, and suddenly, silence. Not complete silence, of course. The spacecraft still hums with fans and computers. But compared to the roaring launch, it feels unbelievably peaceful. There is no wind outside, no birds, no airplanes passing overhead, only endless space. It almost feels like the universe itself is whispering, "Welcome." Then something funny happens. A pencil floats away. One astronaut reaches for a checklist. Instead of staying in their hand, it slowly drifts across the cabin. A small bag of snacks begins floating beside it. Another astronaut laughs as a tiny drop of water escapes from a drinking pouch and hangs in the air like a little crystal ball. Welcome to weightlessness, or as many people call it, zero gravity. Technically, the astronauts are still under the pull of Earth's gravity. They are simply falling around Earth instead of falling toward it. It sounds confusing. But imagine throwing a ball so fast that instead of landing, it keeps missing the ground as Earth curves away beneath it. That is basically what orbit is. The spacecraft is always falling. It just never reaches the ground. Life without normal gravity takes some getting used to. Walking no longer works. Instead, astronauts gently push themselves from one wall to another. At first, they bump into things, sometimes into each other, occasionally into the ceiling. Although in space, ceiling becomes a very flexible idea. Everything floats, up and down stop meaning much. One astronaut could be working above you, another could be upside down. Neither of them cares. After a few days, moving this way starts to feel natural, like learning to swim. Except the swimming pool is a spaceship traveling through the solar system. Daily life aboard the spacecraft soon settles into a comfortable routine. Every morning begins with a wake-up call from mission control. Well, morning according to the schedule. In space, the sun rises and sets much more often while in orbit around Earth. So astronauts mostly ignore the view outside and follow the clock instead. Breakfast comes next. Space food has improved a lot over the years. It is no longer just tubes of mysterious paste. There are tortillas, vegetables, fruits, soups, rice dishes, and even desserts. Still, crumbs can float into equipment, so bread is not always the best choice. Imagine chasing a tiny breadcrumb through the spacecraft because it keeps escaping. Not exactly the breakfast adventure anyone hoped for. After eating, everyone gets to work. Some astronauts check the spacecraft systems. Others perform scientific experiments. They inspect equipment, monitor supplies, clean the cabin, and prepare for the long months ahead. There is always something to do. A spacecraft is a little like a tiny flying home. If nobody cleans it, things get messy surprisingly fast. Exercise is also part of every day. Without gravity, muscles and bones slowly become weaker. So astronauts spend hours using special exercise machines. Running on a treadmill while tied down with straps probably feels a little strange. But it works. It is one of the best ways to stay healthy during a long mission. Then there are the quiet moments, perhaps the most beautiful part of the day, looking out the window. At first, Earth fills almost the entire view. Blue oceans, white clouds, brown deserts, green forests. The moon quietly follows nearby. Everything looks peaceful from up here. There are no borders. No traffic jams, no noisy streets, no signs saying, road closed for construction. Just one beautiful planet floating through space. As the days pass, Earth slowly becomes smaller. The details disappear, continents blend together, clouds become white swirls. Eventually, Earth becomes something very familiar, a bright blue marble. The astronauts know that every person they have ever met lives on that tiny little world. Every family, every city, every beach holiday, every birthday party, every school, every song, every memory. Everything. It is both comforting and a little emotional. Some astronauts have said that seeing Earth from space changes the way they think forever. Looking back, our problems suddenly seem much smaller. Not unimportant, just smaller. There is something peaceful about seeing our entire home floating alone in the darkness. Meanwhile, Mars continues waiting ahead, still distant, still mysterious. Every day it grows just a little larger. The journey has truly begun now. There is no turning back, only forward. Forward through millions of kilometers of silent space. Forward toward the red planet that humans dreamed about for thousands of years. And as our little spacecraft glides quietly between the stars, surrounded by endless darkness and gentle sunlight, we begin to understand something remarkable. Leaving Earth behind is not only a journey across space, it is also a journey of the human spirit. A journey powered by curiosity, by courage, and by one very old question that has followed us since we first looked up at the night sky: what is waiting out there? Our journey continues. Earth is now only a bright blue star behind us. Mars is slowly growing larger ahead. Between the two planets lies an ocean so huge that even light needs several minutes to cross parts of it. And right in the middle of that silent ocean, there is us, a tiny spacecraft. A handful of people and a very long trip. It sounds exciting, and it is, but after the first few weeks, something interesting happens. Space stops feeling like an adventure every minute. Instead, it starts feeling normal. That may sound surprising, but humans are very good at getting used to strange things. Live near a train station for long enough, and you stop noticing the trains. Live in space for months, and floating becomes just another Tuesday. The astronauts wake up each day inside their small sleeping rooms. Well, rooms might be a generous word. Think of them as cozy little spaces just big enough for one person. Each astronaut has a sleeping bag attached to the wall, or the ceiling, or the floor. Honestly, it does not matter anymore. In zero gravity, every direction works equally well. There is no up, there is no down, only wherever your head happens to be. At bedtime, astronauts zip themselves into their sleeping bags so they do not gently drift around the cabin all night. Imagine waking up because you slowly floated into the control panel. Not dangerous, just slightly embarrassing. The funny thing is, sleeping without gravity is actually quite comfortable once you get used to it. On Earth, your body presses against the mattress. Your shoulders, hips, and back carry your weight. In space, that pressure disappears. It almost feels like floating inside a warm cloud. Well, a cloud filled with computers and air filters, and probably one person quietly snoring. Every crew has one. Morning arrives, not because the sun rises outside, but because the schedule says it is morning. The astronauts quickly learn that routine is very important. Without routines, days would begin blending together. Monday would feel like Wednesday. Wednesday would feel like Sunday. Eventually someone would ask, "What day is it?" And everyone would simply shrug, so they keep a regular schedule. Wake up, wash, eat breakfast, check today's tasks. Simple routines help the mind stay healthy. Breakfast is another reminder that life in space is different. Nobody pours cereal into a bowl. Milk would become hundreds of floating little drops. That would make breakfast far more exciting than anyone wants. Instead, food comes in carefully prepared packages. Some meals only need warm water, others are ready to eat. There are vegetables, fruit, rice, chicken, pasta, beans, and even desserts. Scientists work hard to make space food healthy because astronauts burn plenty of energy every day. The menu may not be exactly like your favorite restaurant, but after months in space, even a simple tortilla probably tastes wonderful. Speaking of tortillas, they are actually more useful than bread. Bread creates crumbs, crumbs float. Floating crumbs can end up inside expensive computers. Imagine explaining to mission control that a tiny piece of toast defeated a spacecraft. Nobody wants that report. After breakfast comes exercise. Every single day, there are no excuses. No saying, "I'll skip today." Without gravity pulling on the body, muscles begin shrinking. Bones slowly lose minerals. The body starts forgetting how to live under Earth's gravity. To stop this from happening, astronauts spend around 2 hours exercising. They run on treadmills while wearing straps that hold them down. They ride exercise bikes. They lift resistance machines specially designed for space. It looks a little funny. Running while floating is not something you see every day. Still, it works. By the end of the workout, everyone is sweating just like they would back home. Then comes work. A spacecraft heading toward Mars is almost like a tiny flying laboratory. There are always experiments to perform, sensors to check, air filters to clean, water recycling systems to inspect, computers to monitor. One small problem can quickly become a big problem if ignored. That means maintenance never really stops. Astronauts become part scientist, part engineer, part electrician, and occasionally part plumber. Spacecraft have a surprising number of pipes. Imagine hearing a strange little noise somewhere inside the cabin. Nothing loud, just tick, tick, tick. Immediately everyone starts wondering, was that normal? One astronaut grabs a checklist, another checks the computer, someone shines a flashlight into a panel. Most of the time, it turns out to be something small. But in space, small problems deserve big attention, because there is no repair shop waiting around the corner. If something breaks, the crew must fix it themselves. Fortunately, astronauts train for years before launch. They practice repairing equipment over and over again. Sometimes they even practice fixing things while wearing thick space gloves. Those gloves protect them outside the spacecraft. They also make simple jobs much harder. Picking up a tiny screw while wearing space gloves is a little like trying to sew a button while wearing winter mittens. Possible, but definitely not easy. Then comes the hardest challenge. Not machines, not gravity, not even distance. The hardest challenge is often loneliness. By now, Earth looks incredibly far away. Phone calls are impossible because messages take many minutes to travel between the planets. You cannot simply chat with family whenever you feel homesick. A simple conversation takes patience. You send a message, you wait, the reply slowly arrives. It is a strange way to communicate, almost like writing letters in the old days, except the post office is the entire solar system. The astronauts miss little things: the smell of rain, fresh grass, ocean waves, wind moving through trees, birds singing early in the morning. Even noisy traffic might seem comforting after months surrounded only by the gentle humming of spacecraft systems. Our brains become attached to familiar sounds. Space has almost none. That silence can feel peaceful. It can also feel enormous. This is why astronauts make time for quiet moments together. Maybe they share stories from childhood. Maybe they celebrate someone's birthday with a tiny cake. Well, perhaps not a full cake. Floating frosting sounds like a cleaning nightmare. Maybe they simply watch old movies or listen to music. Small moments help keep the crew connected. Friendship becomes just as important as oxygen. Sometimes an astronaut quietly floats toward the observation window. Outside, nothing but stars. Millions of them. Without Earth's atmosphere, they shine steadily. No twinkling, just endless points of light stretching in every direction. Ahead lies Mars, behind lies Earth, between them. Silence, perhaps this becomes the astronaut's favorite time of day. No alarms, no repairs, no meetings, just floating peacefully while looking at the universe. It is impossible not to think. About home, about family, about history, about the generations who dreamed of this moment. For thousands of years, humans wondered what it would be like to travel between worlds. Now someone is actually doing it. That thought alone is enough to make anyone smile. Our little spacecraft keeps moving through the darkness, day after day, week after week. The journey becomes quieter, calmer, almost peaceful. The crew has settled into life between two worlds, not quite part of Earth anymore, not yet part of Mars. Simply travelers crossing the greatest distance humanity has ever dared to cross. And somewhere ahead, the red planet waits patiently, with its ancient volcanoes, its frozen poles, its endless deserts, and all the mysteries that have called to humanity since the beginning of history. Soon, those mysteries will no longer be distant dreams. They will finally appear beneath the spacecraft's windows, welcoming the first visitors to the quiet world that has waited billions of years for someone to arrive. Our quiet voyage is almost over. For many months, Mars has been nothing more than a bright reddish light sitting patiently ahead of us. Every morning it looked just a little bigger. Every evening it seemed just a little closer. Now something has changed. When the crew gathers around the observation window, nobody has to search for Mars anymore. It fills the view, not completely, but enough that everyone becomes silent for a moment. After all these months, after all the planning, training, waiting, and traveling, there it is, a whole new world. The first thing everyone notices is the color. Mars is not bright red like a fire truck. It is softer than that, more like rusty iron, or an old brick warmed by the afternoon sun. Some places look orange, some look brown, some even appear golden when sunlight strikes them just right. From far away, the planet almost looks peaceful, almost. Because the closer we get, the more Mars begins to reveal its personality, and Mars has plenty of surprises. The crew spends hours looking through cameras and observation windows. Every day new details appear. Dark regions, bright patches, long shadows stretching across the surface, huge open plains, and then someone notices movement, not people, not animals, dust. A thin cloud rises from the ground and slowly drifts across the landscape. Soon another appears, then another. Mars is famous for its dust storms. Some are quite small. A little swirl of dust dancing across the ground, almost like a tiny desert tornado. Others become much larger. Sometimes they spread across entire regions. And every so often, something incredible happens. A dust storm grows so enormous that it covers nearly the whole planet. Imagine looking at Earth and seeing one giant storm covering almost every continent. That is exactly the sort of thing Mars can do. The dust itself is very fine, almost like powder. It sticks to everything. If you were walking there, your boots would probably come back looking reddish-orange after only a few steps. Space engineers worry about this dust a lot. It can cover solar panels. It can sneak into tiny mechanical parts. It can make cameras dirty. Honestly, Martian dust seems determined to get everywhere. It is a little like glitter. Once it arrives, good luck getting rid of it. As the spacecraft continues closing the distance, another beautiful feature becomes easier to see: the polar ice caps. At both the north and south ends of Mars, bright white patches shine in the sunlight. Against the reddish landscape, they almost sparkle. For centuries, astronomers watched these white caps grow and shrink with the seasons. Long before spacecraft visited Mars, these changing ice caps gave scientists an important clue: Mars has seasons. Just like Earth, of course, the seasons are different because Mars is farther from the Sun and takes much longer to complete one trip around it. A Martian year lasts about 687 Earth days. That means if you celebrated your birthday on Mars, you would have to wait almost 2 Earth years before the next one. On the bright side, you would age much more slowly on birthday cards. The ice caps themselves are made mostly of frozen carbon dioxide, which many people know as dry ice, along with frozen water beneath and mixed within them. As winter arrives in each hemisphere, the caps grow larger. When warmer weather returns, parts of the frozen carbon dioxide turn directly into gas and disappear back into the atmosphere. It is a slow seasonal dance that has continued for millions of years. The astronauts cannot stop staring. This is no longer just a distant planet from history books. It is a real place. A world with weather, with seasons, with landscapes that change over time. And then, the mountains appear. At first, they seem like small bumps casting long shadows. But as the spacecraft moves closer, the crew realizes something unbelievable. These are not ordinary mountains. These are giants. Mars is home to some of the largest volcanoes anywhere in the solar system. The greatest of them all is Olympus Mons. Imagine standing at the bottom of a mountain so enormous that you cannot even see its full shape from the ground. It rises about 22 kilometers above the surrounding plains. That is nearly 3 times taller than Mount Everest when measured from its nearby surface. Its base is so wide that an entire country could fit across it. If you tried hiking to the top, you might not even notice you were climbing because the slope is so gentle. It is less like climbing a steep mountain, and more like walking up the world's biggest ramp. The astronauts zoom in using powerful cameras. The volcano looks ancient, quiet, almost peaceful. No smoke, no glowing lava. Just a giant sleeping mountain that has watched Mars change for billions of years. Nearby are more volcanoes, huge ones, each larger than almost anything found on Earth. Mars clearly had an exciting younger life. Today it seems calm, but long ago it was a world shaped by enormous volcanic forces. As the days pass, even more details appear. Deep valleys cut through the surface. Endless deserts stretch beyond the horizon. Old impact craters tell stories of ancient collisions with asteroids. Some craters are sharp and fresh. Others have been softened by wind and dust over countless ages. Every feature seems to whisper a different chapter of Mars' history. The scientists aboard the spacecraft are thrilled. Every new image confirms years of careful planning. Every photograph helps prepare for what comes next. Landing. Now the mood inside the spacecraft slowly changes. There is still excitement. But now excitement is joined by concentration. Checklists appear everywhere. Computers run non-stop calculations. The landing site is reviewed again and again. Weather conditions are studied. Fuel levels are checked. Communication systems are tested. No one wants surprises during landing. Mars may look calm from orbit, but landing there is one of the hardest things humans can attempt. The atmosphere is too thin to slow a spacecraft easily, yet it is thick enough to create dangerous heat during entry. It is almost as if Mars cannot decide whether it wants an atmosphere or not. Engineers sometimes joke that the Martian atmosphere is just thick enough to be annoying, not thick enough for airplanes, not thin enough to ignore. Landing requires perfect timing. Every second matters. The astronauts review emergency procedures once again. They have practiced these steps hundreds of times. Still, everyone feels a few butterflies. Even experienced explorers get nervous before something this important. That is perfectly normal. It means they understand the challenge ahead. Before going to sleep, one astronaut floats quietly to the window. Mars fills nearly the entire view now. Its curved horizon glows softly beneath the sun. The thin atmosphere forms a delicate line around the edge of the planet. It is beautiful, peaceful, ancient. Somewhere below lies the place where humans hope to touch another world for the very first time. The astronaut smiles, not because the difficult part is over. In many ways, the hardest part is only beginning, but because after thousands of years of wondering, after myths, after telescopes, after science fiction, after robots, after dreams passed from one generation to the next, humanity has finally arrived, and in our next chapter, we will take the biggest step of this remarkable journey. The descent through the thin Martian sky, where every heartbeat counts, and where the dream of standing on the red planet comes closer than ever before. The moment has finally arrived. For thousands of years, Mars has been a mystery. Ancient people watched it with their own eyes. Astronomers studied it through telescopes. Writers filled it with strange cities and clever Martians. Robots rolled across its dusty ground, sending back pictures that made the whole world stare in amazement. Now, after months of traveling through silent space, our spacecraft is ready to land. Everyone inside is quiet, not because they have nothing to say, because there are moments in life when words simply are not enough. The landing sequence begins. Outside the windows, Mars fills the view. The spacecraft slowly turns into the correct position. Computers take over many of the controls. Every number is checked. Every system reports its condition. Everything looks good. The crew takes one last look at the black sky above. In a few minutes, they will enter the thin Martian atmosphere. Unlike Earth, Mars does not have a thick blanket of air. Its atmosphere is incredibly thin. In fact, if you stood on the surface without a spacesuit, well, let's just say it would be a very short sightseeing trip. The spacecraft begins its descent. At first, nothing seems to happen. Then a faint glow appears outside the windows. The thin atmosphere starts rubbing against the spacecraft at incredible speed. The outside becomes hot, very hot. Inside, however, everything remains calm. The heat shield does exactly what it was designed to do. Slowly, the spacecraft loses speed. Not enough. Mars refuses to make things easy. The atmosphere is simply too thin to slow the spacecraft completely. Next comes the parachute. It opens with a sudden pull. For a moment, everyone feels the spacecraft shake. Speed drops again. Still not enough. Now the landing engines take over. Soft bursts of fire appear beneath the spacecraft. Dust begins swirling across the ground below. The crew can finally see the landscape clearly. Reddish soil, scattered rocks, long shadows stretching across an endless plain. The engines become quieter. The ground rises slowly toward them. 10 meters, 5, 2, then a gentle bump, silence. No cheering, no dramatic music, just one quiet moment. Humanity has arrived on Mars. Nobody rushes outside. First comes another checklist: pressure, power, communication, life support. Engineers do love their checklists. Honestly, they probably have a checklist for checking the checklists. Eventually, the green light appears. It is safe. The first astronaut carefully climbs toward the airlock. The door opens. A ladder stretches toward the ground. Below waits millions of years of untouched history. One careful step, then another. Finally, a boot touches the dusty surface. The first footprint appears in the soft Martian soil. It is such a small mark, yet it carries the weight of thousands of years of dreaming. The astronaut pauses for a moment, not because walking is difficult. Mars has only about 38% of Earth's gravity. Everything feels lighter. Almost like walking while wearing invisible springs under your boots. Instead, the pause comes from pure wonder. This is another world. The astronaut looks around. The first thing they notice is the silence, not ordinary silence. A deep silence unlike anything on Earth. There are no birds singing, no insects buzzing, no leaves moving in the wind. No distant cars, no airplanes, only the faint sound of their own breathing inside the helmet. Even when a gentle breeze moves across the desert, the thin atmosphere carries very little sound. It feels as though the entire planet is whispering. The sky looks different too. It is not the bright blue sky of Earth. Instead, it has a soft orange and pink color caused by tiny dust particles floating in the atmosphere. The sun looks slightly smaller. Its light feels gentler. Far away, the horizon seems strangely close. Mars is smaller than Earth, so its curve is easier to notice. The astronauts begin walking carefully. Each step leaves another footprint behind. Unlike footprints on a busy beach, these may remain here for thousands, perhaps even millions of years. There is almost no rain, no rivers, very little wind strong enough to erase them. Imagine leaving your footprints somewhere knowing they could outlive entire civilizations. That is quite a strange thought. The landscape stretches endlessly in every direction. Dust, rocks. Small hills, old craters, everything looks ancient. Nothing seems rushed. Mars feels like a world that has been quietly waiting while time moved slowly around it. The rocks immediately catch the scientists' attention. Some are smooth, others are jagged. Some contain tiny layers, almost like pages inside a history book. Every layer tells a story. A story of volcanic eruptions, ancient rivers, powerful winds, meteor impacts, billions of years of change. The astronauts begin collecting samples. Each rock goes into carefully labeled containers. Back on Earth, scientists will spend years studying them. Perhaps one tiny stone will answer questions people have asked for generations, or perhaps it will create 10 new questions instead. Science has a habit of doing that. Nearby lies a wide open desert. It looks familiar in some ways, almost like deserts found on Earth, but something feels different: the colors, the silence, the sky. There is no smell of plants, no buzzing life hidden beneath the sand, only dust stretching toward the horizon, yet even this empty-looking place is full of clues. The astronauts set up scientific instruments. Weather stations begin measuring temperature and wind. Special drills collect soil from beneath the surface. Cameras take detailed photographs. Ground-penetrating radar searches for hidden layers underground. Every machine begins quietly doing its job. One small helicopter-like drone lifts gently into the air. Flying on Mars is surprisingly difficult because the atmosphere is so thin. Its spinning blades must move much faster than helicopters on Earth. Slowly, it rises above the landing site. From above, the tiny human camp looks almost fragile against the endless desert. The scientists smile as new images arrive. Already they are seeing things impossible to notice from the ground. The exploration has truly begun. As the hours pass, everyone becomes a little more comfortable. Walking feels easier. Moving equipment becomes almost enjoyable thanks to the lower gravity. Someone accidentally pushes a tool a little too hard. It floats farther than expected. Nobody says anything for a second, then everyone laughs, even on another planet. Gravity still enjoys surprising people. Eventually, one astronaut climbs a small rocky hill. From the top, they stop and turn around. The landing craft sits quietly below. Beyond it lies an endless red landscape disappearing into the distance. Then the astronaut looks upward. High in the dark daytime sky shines a tiny blue star. Earth, so small, so beautiful. Every person they have ever known lives on that tiny point of light. Every family, every memory, every story, everything. For a moment, Mars no longer feels lonely. Instead, it feels connected. Two worlds sharing the same sun, separated by millions of kilometers, yet linked forever by curiosity. The astronaut smiles inside the helmet. The dream has become reality. Humanity is standing on Mars, but this is only the beginning. Because beneath these ancient rocks, hidden beneath layers of dust and frozen ground, may lie one of the greatest secrets in the history of the solar system. The question that has followed us since the first humans looked up at the red light in the night sky: was Mars ever alive? The first few days on Mars pass quietly. The excitement of landing has settled into a steady rhythm. Every morning begins with another plan, another list of places to visit, and another chance to learn something new about this ancient world. The astronauts no longer feel like visitors, they feel like explorers. Every rock, every hill, and every patch of dusty ground might hold a clue. Because there is one question that refuses to leave anyone's mind: was there ever life on Mars? It is a simple question, but it may have one of the biggest answers in human history. If the answer is yes, then life did not begin only on Earth. That would change the way we think about the universe forever. So where do scientists begin? With water. Here on Earth, wherever there is water, there is life. Tiny bacteria live in hot springs. Fish swim beneath thick ice. Microbes survive deep underground. Some tiny organisms even live in places that seem impossible. Life, it turns out, is very stubborn. Give it a small chance and it often says, "Thank you very much." I'll say that is why water has become the biggest clue when studying Mars. Today, Mars is cold and dry. Most of its rivers are gone. Its lakes have disappeared. Rain does not fall like it does on Earth. At first glance, Mars looks like a giant desert, but looks can be very misleading. Imagine walking through a dry riverbed on Earth. There is no flowing water anymore, yet the smooth stones and winding shape clearly tell you that a river once passed through. Mars has places just like that. From orbit, scientists have discovered long valleys twisting across the surface. Some stretch for hundreds of kilometers. They look remarkably similar to river systems found on Earth. These are not random scratches in the ground. They have branches, curves, small channels joining larger ones. Nature has left behind its fingerprints. And those fingerprints point toward flowing water. Billions of years ago, Mars may have looked very different. Scientists believe the young planet had a thicker atmosphere. The climate was warmer. Liquid water could exist on the surface. Rivers flowed, lakes formed, perhaps even shallow seas covered parts of the planet. It is strange to imagine. The dry, dusty world we see today may once have had moving water sparkling under the sun. If someone had visited Mars 4 billion years ago, they might have seen a planet that felt surprisingly familiar, not exactly like Earth, but much closer than the Mars we know today. As the astronauts travel across the landscape, they arrive at one of these ancient riverbeds. The valley stretches far into the distance. Its shape tells a silent story. Long ago, water carved this path, not in a single afternoon, but over countless years, drop by drop, flow after flow. The rocks here are especially interesting. Some are smooth and rounded. That usually happens when water rolls stones against each other over long periods. Others contain tiny layers of minerals. Certain minerals only form when water is present. The scientists carefully collect samples. Every small rock could hold important clues. One astronaut jokes, "This might be the most expensive handful of stones in history." Everyone laughs. It probably is. Back on Earth, researchers will study these samples for years, perhaps decades. Some answers take time. Not all the water disappeared, though. Scientists believe much of it may still be hiding underground. Deep beneath the dusty surface lies frozen water ice. Some missions have already confirmed this. Powerful radar instruments have detected large amounts of ice buried beneath the soil, especially near the poles. Imagine digging into the ground and finding frozen water beneath your feet. That discovery is exciting for two reasons. First, future astronauts could use that water for drinking, growing plants, and making oxygen. Second, where there is water, scientists naturally wonder about life. Could tiny microbes still survive below the surface? It sounds like science fiction, but Earth offers some surprising examples. Deep underground, where sunlight never reaches, tiny living organisms continue their quiet lives. Some survive near hot rocks. Others live inside cracks filled with water. They need almost nothing. If life can survive in such difficult places on Earth, could something similar exist beneath Mars? Nobody knows. That is exactly why the search continues. The astronauts drill into the ground, collecting soil from deeper layers. Special machines seal the samples carefully to avoid contamination. If there is even the smallest sign of ancient life, scientists want to study it with the greatest care. As they work, it is impossible not to think about the brave little robots that came before them. Long before humans stepped onto Mars, robotic explorers spent years searching this world. The twin rovers, Spirit and Opportunity, surprised everyone by lasting far longer than expected. Opportunity worked for nearly 15 years. That is a remarkable achievement. Its final message became famous around the world. As a giant dust storm covered the planet, the rover slowly lost power. Its last transmission suggested that the sky was growing dark. It was a quiet ending for a machine that had traveled many kilometers across another planet. Then came curiosity. A rover about the size of a small car. It climbed mountains, drilled rocks, and discovered that ancient Mars once had environments where microbial life could have survived. Not proof of life, but proof that life had a chance. More recently, Perseverance arrived. Its mission became even more ambitious. It began collecting carefully selected rock samples that future missions may return to Earth. It also carried a tiny helicopter named Ingenuity. Few people expected such a small aircraft to succeed. After all, flying in the thin Martian atmosphere is incredibly difficult, yet ingenuity rose into the air again and again, proving that powered flight on another planet was possible. Sometimes the smallest machines achieve the biggest firsts. The astronauts smile whenever they pass one of these robotic landmarks. In many ways, the robots were the first scouts. They explored dangerous places, tested new technology, prepared the path for human explorers. It feels almost like meeting old friends, quiet friends, friends who mostly communicate through antennas. Still friends, as evening approaches, the astronauts climb a gentle ridge overlooking the valley. The sun hangs low in the dusty sky. Its light turns the landscape into soft shades of orange, gold, and red. Long shadows stretch across the ancient riverbed. It is peaceful. One astronaut kneels beside a rock that may have rested here for billions of years. Imagine everything this stone has witnessed: flowing water, volcanic eruptions, meteor impacts. Dust storms beyond counting, and now, a human hand gently brushing away its dust. History has come full circle. The search for life continues. No exciting alien footprints appear. No mysterious cities rise from beneath the sand. Science is rarely that dramatic. Instead, discovery happens slowly. One rock, one sample, one careful measurement at a time. Sometimes the greatest discoveries arrive quietly, and perhaps that is exactly how Mars wants to tell its story, patiently, without rushing, without making a fuss. Because every answer found here leads to another question, and every question brings us a little closer to understanding not only Mars, but also ourselves. Tomorrow, our explorers will travel even farther across this remarkable world, where giant canyons, towering volcanoes, and landscapes beyond imagination are waiting to share the next chapter of the Red Planet's incredible history. The sun is slowly setting over Mars. The light grows softer with every passing minute. Long shadows stretch across the dusty ground, and the rocky hills begin to glow with warm shades of orange and gold. Our astronauts have finished another busy day. The scientific tools are packed away, the samples are safely stored, the computers quietly process today's discoveries. For a little while, there is nothing left to do except enjoy the view. One astronaut sits on a nearby rock. Well, sits as comfortably as someone can while wearing a spacesuit. That probably takes a bit of practice. They look across the silent landscape and begin thinking about all the stories people once told about this planet. It is funny, really. For hundreds of years, humans imagined Mars as a busy place. A world filled with strange cities, wise scientists, brave explorers, or sometimes terrifying aliens who apparently woke up one morning and decided Earth looked interesting. Science fiction can be wonderfully dramatic. The real Mars, however, is much quieter. No glowing cities, no giant crystal palaces, no little green people waving hello from behind a rock, only dust. Ancient mountains, old riverbeds, and endless silence. At first that might sound disappointing, but somehow it is not, because the real Mars has its own kind of beauty. It does not need imaginary kingdoms. Its history is already incredible. Still, it is worth asking an interesting question. Why did so many writers imagine civilizations on Mars? Why not somewhere else? Part of the answer is simple. Mars looked familiar. When astronomers first observed it through telescopes, they saw bright polar caps, dark regions, changing seasons. And of course, the famous canals. To many people, Mars seemed almost like another Earth, just a little farther away. If Earth had rivers, perhaps Mars had rivers too. If Earth had cities, perhaps Mars had cities. The human brain enjoys filling in missing pieces. Imagine looking at a blurry photograph. Your mind automatically tries to sharpen it. It guesses what should be there. Sometimes those guesses are correct, sometimes not quite. Mars became one of history's biggest guessing games, and people love mysteries. The less we know about something, the easier it becomes for imagination to move in. Think about an old abandoned house. If someone tells you nothing about it, your mind starts creating stories. Maybe pirates hid treasure there. Maybe a ghost lives upstairs. Maybe it is just an old house that desperately needs a new roof. Usually, the last answer is the correct one. But it is also the least exciting. Mars worked the same way. Nobody knew what was waiting there, so writers happily filled the empty spaces. Some imagined peaceful civilizations. Others imagined advanced technology. Some pictured deserts crossed by enormous canals carrying precious water. Others imagined forests, oceans, and strange animals unlike anything on Earth. Every writer created a different Mars, and readers loved every version. One of the most famous examples came from H.G. Wells' Asterisk. In The War of the Worlds, he imagined intelligent Martians invading Earth with giant machines and powerful weapons. The story became famous not because people believed it was true. It became famous because it explored an interesting idea. What if humans were no longer the most advanced civilization? That question made readers think. Good science fiction often does exactly that. It asks impossible questions, then quietly waits for your imagination to answer. Back in Bengal, writers approached Mars in their own unique way. Stories by Pramendra Mitra, Satyajit Ray, Idrish Bardhan and many others mixed science with adventure. Their characters explored mysterious worlds, solved strange puzzles, and met ideas far beyond everyday life. These stories did something important. They made science exciting. A child reading about space adventures might suddenly become curious about astronomy. Someone fascinated by imaginary inventions might later study engineering. A reader dreaming about rockets might one day help build one. That is the quiet magic of fiction. It plants tiny seeds. Years later, those seeds sometimes grow into real discoveries. History is full of examples. Long before submarines became common, writers imagined underwater ships. Long before satellites, people dreamed about machines orbiting Earth. Before video calls existed, stories imagined talking across great distances. Even the idea of traveling to the moon appeared in books long before rockets became powerful enough. Of course, fiction does not always predict the future correctly, thankfully. Otherwise, we might all have flying cars parked outside our houses by now. Instead, we still spend time looking for parking spaces. Perhaps that is slightly less glamorous. Even so, imagination often points science in new directions. Scientists themselves frequently admit that they loved science fiction as children. Many engineers grew up reading stories about distant planets. Astronomers watched movies about space. Physicists dreamed about impossible inventions. The stories did not give them ready-made answers. They gave them curiosity, and curiosity is one of the strongest fuels for science. Think about it. Every spacecraft begins as an idea, before metal is shaped, before engines are built, before computers are switched on, someone quietly imagines it. Every great invention is imagined before it is created. In that sense, imagination is not the opposite of science. It is often the first step toward it. The astronauts continue walking across the Martian landscape. Everywhere they look, reality is more complicated than fiction ever expected. The volcanoes are larger, the valleys are deeper. The history is older. Mars may not have giant cities, but it has something equally fascinating, a story written across billions of years. Every layer of rock tells another chapter. Every crater marks another event. Every grain of dust has been shaped by winds blowing across the planet for ages beyond imagination. That is a different kind of adventure. Not one filled with laser battles or alien kings, but one filled with real mysteries waiting to be solved. As night slowly falls, the sky above Mars becomes darker. Tiny stars begin appearing one by one. Then, high above the horizon, a familiar blue light shines softly. Earth, it looks peaceful from here, almost unreal. The astronauts stand quietly for a few moments. Someone smiles and says, "You know, the real Mars turned out to be even more interesting than the one from the old stories." Nobody disagrees. Because imagination gave us the courage to come here. Science gave us the tools. Together, they carried humanity across millions of kilometers of empty space. Neither could have done it alone. Our little journey through the red planet continues. Tomorrow, we will explore what humans may build here in the future. Not imaginary cities dreamed up by novelists, but real homes. Real research stations, perhaps even the first tiny Martian community. The dreams of yesterday are slowly becoming the plans of tomorrow, and that may be the most wonderful story of all. Our adventure on Mars continues. the excitement of landing has slowly become everyday life. The astronauts no longer stop every 5 minutes just to stare at the landscape. Well, maybe every 10 minutes. After all, it is not every day you get to look across another planet. The first scientific missions have gone well. Rock samples have been collected. Weather stations are working. The first surveys of the area are complete. Now comes a much bigger question. What if humans wanted to stay? Not for a few days, not for a few months, but for years. Maybe even generations. Could Mars ever become a second home? It is a wonderful question. It is also an incredibly difficult one, because Mars is beautiful, but it is not exactly welcoming. Imagine arriving at a hotel where the air is impossible to breathe. The temperature can drop below -100 degrees Celsius. Dust blows into everything. And stepping outside without a space suit is strongly discouraged. You might leave a very honest review. Lovely views needs atmosphere. That is the challenge. Humans cannot simply build a house on Mars the same way they do on Earth. Everything must be carefully planned. The first priority is shelter. A home on Mars is much more than 4 walls and a roof. It is a life support system. Every room must protect people from the cold, from harmful radiation, from tiny meteorites, and from the thin Martian atmosphere. Engineers have imagined many clever designs. Some habitats look like large inflatable tubes. These can be packed into rockets while taking up very little space. Once they reach Mars, they expand into comfortable living areas. Others are made from strong metal sections that connect together like giant building blocks. Some scientists have an even more interesting idea. Instead of carrying every brick from Earth, why not use Mars itself? The Martian surface is covered with reddish soil called regolith. Researchers believe future astronauts may be able to turn this soil into building material. Special machines could pack it into strong blocks or even use giant 3D printers to create walls layer by layer. Imagine arriving on Mars and watching your house slowly print itself. That would certainly save a lot of moving day stress. Some plans even suggest building homes underground. Mars has ancient lava tubes, huge tunnels left behind by flowing lava billions of years ago. These natural caves could provide protection from radiation and extreme temperatures. Nature may have already built part of humanity's future neighborhood. Once the habitat is ready, another problem appears: food. Astronauts cannot keep bringing meals from Earth forever. That would become very expensive, and besides, everyone eventually misses fresh vegetables. Scientists are already studying how to grow plants in space. On the International Space Station, astronauts have successfully grown lettuce, peppers, and other crops. Mars would be more difficult. Its soil contains chemicals called perchlorates that are not friendly to most plants, so the soil would need careful treatment. Some crops might grow in special containers instead. Others could use hydroponics. That is a method where plants grow in water filled with nutrients instead of ordinary soil. Imagine walking into a greenhouse on Mars, outside. Dust stretches to the horizon. Inside, bright green leaves gently grow under warm lights. It would probably become everyone's favorite room, not just because of the food. Because it reminds people of Earth. Green plants have a funny way of making any place feel more alive. They also help in another very important way. They produce oxygen. Of course, plants alone would not be enough at first. Scientists have been developing machines that can make oxygen directly from the Martian atmosphere. Now, this sounds almost like magic. But it is actually chemistry. Mars' atmosphere is mostly carbon dioxide. Special equipment can separate the oxygen from those molecules. One small experiment has already shown this can work. Future versions could produce much larger amounts. That oxygen would help astronauts breathe. It could also be used to make rocket fuel for the journey home. Not bad for a planet that hardly has any breathable air. Water is another challenge. Thankfully, Mars has frozen water beneath its surface. Future explorers may drill into the ground, melt the ice, clean it, and use it for drinking, cooking, washing, and growing food. Water would become one of the colony's greatest treasures. Not because it is rare, because every drop matters. Nothing would be wasted. Water would be cleaned and recycled again and again. In fact, future Martian settlers might become the greatest recyclers in human history. Even a tiny leak would deserve immediate attention. Engineers also face another problem: energy. Homes need electricity, lights, computers, heating systems, scientific equipment, communication, everything depends on power. Solar panels are an obvious choice because Mars still receives sunlight. But there is one problem: dust. Mars seems to enjoy covering everything with dust. A solar panel works much better when it is clean, so future colonies may use robots to sweep the panels every day. Imagine having a robot whose full-time job is cleaning Martian dust. It might become the busiest employee on the planet. Some experts also believe nuclear power could provide reliable electricity, especially during long dust storms when sunlight becomes weak. A combination of different energy sources would probably keep the settlement running safely. Then comes something people often forget: home is not only about buildings, it is about people. Living on Mars would require teamwork every single day. Everyone would have different jobs. Some would study geology, others would grow food, some would repair machines. Doctors would care for the crew, engineers would solve problems, teachers might even educate the first children born on another planet someday. Imagine the first classroom on Mars. A geography lesson would become very interesting. Today we're learning about Earth. That would sound perfectly normal. Life would also need moments of fun. People cannot work forever. There would be birthdays, movie nights, music, sports designed for lower gravity. Perhaps basketball on Mars would include some very impressive jumps. Just remember not to jump too enthusiastically. You still have to come back down. Friendship would become one of the colony's greatest strengths. When you live millions of kilometers from Earth, the people around you become more than coworkers. They become family. They celebrate together, solve problems together, support one another during difficult days. That peaceful cooperation may become humanity's greatest achievement on Mars. Not the buildings, not the machines, but people from different countries working side by side on a distant world. Mars has no borders, no countries, no old arguments written across its deserts. It offers humanity a rare opportunity, a chance to begin somewhere new with cooperation instead of competition. As evening falls over the growing settlement, gentle lights begin glowing inside the habitats. Outside, the red planet remains cold and silent. Inside, laughter can be heard. Someone is preparing dinner. Someone else is checking tomorrow's weather report. A scientist carefully studies today's rock samples. A gardener smiles at the first fresh tomatoes growing beneath artificial sunlight. The dream that once belonged only to storytellers has become something wonderfully ordinary. People are simply living peacefully on another world. And as we continue our quiet journey, we begin to realize that perhaps the greatest discovery on Mars will not be ancient fossils or hidden rivers. Perhaps it will be discovering just how far human curiosity, kindness, and teamwork can carry us among the stars. The Martian evening has arrived. Outside the habitat, the wind gently pushes fine red dust across the ground. The sun has slipped below the horizon, leaving behind a soft orange glow that slowly fades into darkness. Inside, everything feels warm. The lights are on. Dinner is finished. Someone is making a cup of coffee. Someone else is reading an old novel brought all the way from Earth. It almost feels normal, almost. Because outside these walls is an entire planet that is still wild, cold, and empty. Looking through the window, one astronaut quietly asks, "What if Mars didn't have to stay this way?" The question hangs in the air. It is not a new question. Scientists, engineers, and science fiction writers have been asking it for decades. Could Mars ever become a place where humans could walk outside without a heavy spacesuit? Could rivers flow again? Could trees grow? Could birds someday fly across a blue Martian sky? In other words, could Mars ever become a paradise? The idea has a name: terraforming. It sounds like something from an adventure movie, but the meaning is actually quite simple. Terraforming means changing another planet so it becomes more like Earth. The word itself tells the story. Terra means Earth, so terraforming is, in a way, giving another world a few Earth-like qualities. It is a fascinating idea. It is also one of the biggest engineering challenges anyone has ever imagined. Let's begin with the biggest problem. Mars is cold, very cold. The average temperature is around minus 60 degrees Celsius. Some places become much colder than that during winter. It is not exactly picnic weather. Scientists have wondered if there might be ways to warm the planet. One idea is to trap more heat. Earth stays warm partly because its atmosphere holds in some of the sun's warmth. Mars has only a thin atmosphere, so much of that heat escapes back into space. If Mars somehow gained a thicker atmosphere, temperatures could slowly rise. That sounds simple when said in one sentence. Actually doing it, not quite so simple. Some scientists have suggested releasing greenhouse gases that could trap heat. Others have imagined giant mirrors floating in space, reflecting extra sunlight onto the planet. Imagine a mirror so large it shines sunlight onto an entire world. That would certainly be the biggest mirror anyone has ever cleaned, assuming someone had to clean it. As temperatures increased, frozen carbon dioxide near the poles might turn into gas. That gas could make the atmosphere a little thicker. In theory, that could create a chain reaction where the planet slowly becomes warmer. At least, that was one idea. Modern research suggests Mars probably does not have enough trapped carbon dioxide to create a thick, Earth-like atmosphere this way. Even if we released everything available, it would still fall far short of what humans need. So today, many scientists think terraforming Mars would be much harder than people once hoped. Not impossible forever, just far beyond our current technology. Then there is water. Mars already has frozen water beneath its surface and at its poles. If the planet became warmer, some of that ice might melt. Perhaps small rivers could appear again, maybe lakes, perhaps even shallow seas over incredibly long periods. It is a beautiful thought. Imagine standing beside a quiet Martian lake while watching two tiny moons cross the evening sky. That sounds wonderfully peaceful. Of course, before dreaming about lakes, someone would first need to invent a very good Martian mosquito. Actually, on second thought, perhaps we can skip that part. Not every Earth feature needs to move to Mars. Plants are another popular idea. Many people imagine forests spreading across the red planet, green hills replacing dusty deserts. Flowers blooming beneath a blue sky, but plants need much more than sunlight. They need water, suitable temperatures, nutrients, and most importantly, air they can actually survive in. Before forests could exist, countless other problems would need solving. Terraforming is less like decorating a room. It is more like rebuilding an entire planet, piece by piece, year by year. Century by century, perhaps even longer. Some scientists believe it could take hundreds or thousands of years. Others think it may never happen at all. And that brings us to another important question. Should we even do it? This is where science meets philosophy. Imagine Mars still holds tiny forms of microbial life hidden deep underground. We have not found any yet, but imagine they exist. If humans completely changed the planet, what would happen to them? Would we accidentally destroy the only alien life in the solar system? That would be a terrible mistake. Many scientists believe we should first understand Mars completely before changing it. Some even argue that planets have value simply because they exist. Perhaps Mars deserves to remain Mars. After all, nobody suggests turning Antarctica into a giant shopping mall. Some places are worth protecting because they are unique. Mars may deserve the same respect. Others believe careful terraforming could someday help humanity survive if Earth ever faced enormous challenges. A second home for our species could become very important in the distant future. Both ideas come from the same place, caring about the future. Neither side asks easy questions. And easy answers are surprisingly rare. Then comes my favorite question of all. Would humans change Mars, or would Mars change humans? At first, that sounds like a strange question. Of course, humans would build homes, grow food, create roads, construct research stations. Mars would slowly become more familiar, but living there might also change us. Children born on Mars would grow up under lower gravity. They would see Earth only as a bright blue star. Their stories, their memories, their idea of home might be completely different from ours. Perhaps they would celebrate 2 birthdays, one based on Earth, one based on the longer Martian year. Perhaps they would laugh at old photographs of people carrying umbrellas. What is rain? A Martian child might ask. That thought feels both wonderful and a little sad. Every generation shapes its home, but every home also shapes the people living there. Earth shaped us. Its oceans, its mountains, its gravity, its blue sky, its seasons. Mars would shape future generations in its own quiet way. Maybe they would become more patient. Life on Mars would teach people not to waste resources. Every drop of water would matter. Every breath of oxygen would matter. Teamwork would matter. Perhaps Mars would remind humanity how connected we really are, because on another planet, survival would depend less on competition and more on cooperation. As the astronauts finish another peaceful evening, they step outside for a few moments. The stars shine brilliantly above them. Earth glows softly in the distance. The cold Martian wind brushes against their spacesuits. The planet is still empty, still ancient, still wonderfully mysterious. Maybe Mars will never become another Earth. Maybe it should not. Perhaps its greatest gift is not becoming a paradise. Perhaps its greatest gift is teaching us to appreciate the paradise we already have. Because after traveling millions of kilometers across space, after standing beneath another sky, after walking across another world, our own blue planet somehow feels even more precious. And that may be the most beautiful lesson Mars has been quietly waiting billions of years to share. Our journey is almost at its end. The Martian night is quiet. Outside the habitat, the cold desert stretches farther than the eye can see. The stars shine with incredible brightness, untouched by the thick atmosphere that softens their light back on Earth. Everything feels calm. The astronauts have finished their work for the day. The machines hum gently. The lights inside the habitat glow softly. It is the perfect time to stop thinking like engineers for a little while and start thinking like storytellers. Throughout this journey, we have talked about rockets, telescopes, volcanoes, robots, rivers, and dreams. But there is one word we have quietly carried with us from the very beginning. Heaven. It is an interesting word. Ask 10 people what heaven means, and you may hear 10 different answers. Some imagine a peaceful place beyond life. Some think of perfect happiness. Some picture endless gardens beneath bright skies. Others simply think of home. Perhaps heaven is not always a place. Perhaps it is a feeling. When ancient people looked toward Mars, they did not see a dusty desert. They saw mystery, hope, possibility. The planet became a blank page where every culture could write its own story. Some imagined gods, some imagined warriors, some imagined wise civilizations watching the stars just like we were. The real Mars turned out to be very different. No great cities, no giant canals. No welcoming committee standing beside the landing site with tiny Martian flags, although to be fair, that would have been a lovely surprise. Instead, Mars welcomed us with silence, and somehow, that silence had its own kind of beauty. There is something peaceful about a place that has waited billions of years without asking for attention. Mars never tried to impress us. It simply existed. Patiently, quietly, waiting for curious minds to arrive. Maybe that is what makes exploration so special. It is not only about finding new places, it is about changing the way we see old ones. Think about the astronauts looking back at Earth. Before leaving home, Earth probably felt ordinary. Busy mornings, traffic, rainy afternoons, the smell of fresh bread, children laughing in parks. Birds singing before sunrise, things people hardly notice during everyday life. Then they traveled millions of kilometers away. Suddenly, those ordinary things became extraordinary. Sometimes you must leave home to understand how beautiful home really is. That lesson appears again and again throughout history. Sailors crossed oceans. Explorers climbed mountains. Scientists traveled to frozen deserts in Antarctica. Astronauts crossed space. Each journey returned with more than maps. It returned with perspective. Perhaps that is the greatest treasure exploration gives us. Not gold, not land, not fame, understanding. Human beings are naturally curious. Give a child a closed door, and they immediately want to know what is behind it. Place a mountain on the horizon, and someone will eventually climb it. Show a tiny red planet in the night sky. And sooner or later, someone will build a rocket. Curiosity seems to be written into us. It has always pushed humanity forward. Without curiosity, we might never have crossed oceans. We might never have discovered electricity. We might never have invented medicine, airplanes, computers, or spacecraft. Curiosity often begins with one tiny question. What if it is such a small sentence? Only 2 words, yet those 2 words have changed history countless times. What if we sail farther? What if we build a telescope? What if people could fly? What if we visit Mars? Every great achievement begins as a question that sounds impossible, and sometimes the impossible quietly becomes ordinary. That is exactly what science fiction has always understood. The stories were never really about aliens, or giant robots, or impossible machines. Those things are fun, of course. But beneath them lies something much deeper. Science fiction reminds us that tomorrow does not have to look exactly like today. It encourages us to imagine better futures, brighter futures, kinder futures. Writers like Satyajit Ray, Premendra Mitra and many others understood this beautifully. Their stories invited readers to wonder, not simply to escape reality, but to become curious about it. A child reading about space today may become tomorrow's scientist. Someone fascinated by imaginary inventions may one day create real ones. Dreams have an unusual habit of finding their way into laboratories. Sometimes fiction quietly whispers, and science listens. Perhaps that is why these stories remain so powerful. They do not tell us what the future will be. They ask what kind of future we want to build. As our astronauts continue living peacefully on Mars, they slowly realize something unexpected. The greatest discovery on this mission was not hidden beneath a rock. It was not buried inside ancient ice. It was not waiting at the bottom of a crater. The greatest discovery happened inside themselves. They learned patience. They learned teamwork. They learned how small Earth looks from far away. And they learned how deeply connected every human being really is. Standing on another planet makes arguments seem smaller. Borders become invisible. The things that separate people begin to fade. The things that unite us become easier to see. Perhaps that is another kind of heaven, not a place above the clouds, but a moment when people remember they are sharing one small home together. Mars teaches that lesson without saying a single word. It simply waits, quiet, ancient, beautiful. One evening before going to sleep, an astronaut steps outside once more. The stars stretch endlessly across the black sky. Earth glows like a tiny sapphire hanging in the distance. For a long time, nothing moves, nothing speaks. The astronaut smiles. Not because they have reached the end of the journey, but because they understand something they did not fully understand before leaving Earth. Heaven was never only about arriving somewhere. Sometimes heaven is found in the journey itself, in the courage to ask questions, in the kindness of traveling together, in the excitement of discovering something new, and perhaps most of all, in never losing the child inside us who still looks at the night sky and quietly whispers, "I wonder." That simple thought has carried humanity across oceans, through history, and now across the vast emptiness between worlds. And as long as that curiosity remains alive, there will always be another horizon waiting for us, another mystery, another dream, another story ready to begin. The time has come. Our long stay on Mars is coming to an end. The research stations are still standing quietly against the red desert. The weather instruments continue recording the cold Martian winds. The little greenhouse is filled with fresh green leaves. The footprints left by the astronauts are still there, just as they were on the very first day. On Mars, footprints do not disappear quickly. There is almost no rain, no flowing rivers, very little wind strong enough to erase them. Those first steps may remain for thousands of years. Perhaps one day, future explorers will walk past them and smile. They might say, "So this is where it all began." Inside the habitat, everyone is busy, not rushing, just carefully preparing for one final journey. The rock samples are packed into special containers. Every notebook is checked. Every hard drive holding photographs and scientific data is safely stored. Nothing important can be left behind. Someone even finds a missing pen floating inside a storage compartment. Apparently, even after months on Mars, pens still enjoy going on adventures of their own. The astronauts laugh. Little moments like this have become part of everyday life. Before leaving, the crew walks through the habitat one last time. The laboratory, the sleeping rooms, the exercise area, the tiny greenhouse, the kitchen where hundreds of meals were shared. At first, these rooms felt unfamiliar. Now they feel like home. Humans have an amazing ability to turn almost any place into something comfortable. Give us enough time and we will hang photos on the wall, name the coffee machine, argue about whose turn it is to clean. Some things never change. Outside, the rocket waits quietly on the landing pad. It looks smaller than everyone remembered. Maybe that is because Mars itself has begun to feel larger, more familiar, less like a distant dream. The astronauts climb a nearby hill for one final look. The landscape stretches endlessly toward the horizon. The giant volcanoes remain silent. The ancient valleys still hold the memories of rivers that vanished billions of years ago. Dust drifts gently across the plains. Nothing seems hurried. Mars has waited this long. It can wait a little longer. One astronaut quietly says, "Thank you," not to another person, to the planet itself. It may sound a little strange. But after spending months here, Mars almost feels like an old friend. A quiet friend, the kind who does not talk very much, but always has interesting stories if you know how to listen. Soon it is time. The astronauts board the return spacecraft. The engines come alive. A deep vibration moves through the cabin. Outside, the landing site slowly grows smaller. The habitats become tiny dots. The tracks left by the exploration vehicles disappear beneath clouds of dust. Then, Mars begins falling away beneath them, higher, higher, until the red planet becomes a beautiful round world floating in the darkness. It is strange how quickly perspective changes. Only yesterday, the astronauts were standing on its surface. Now they can see almost the whole planet at once. Its white polar caps shine in the sunlight. The dusty deserts stretch across its surface. Its enormous volcanoes cast long shadows. From space, Mars looks peaceful, almost gentle. The astronauts spend a long time simply watching it. No one speaks very much. Some moments deserve silence. The journey home begins. Once again, there is nothing outside except stars. The familiar rhythm of life inside the spacecraft returns. Breakfast, exercise, maintenance, scientific reports, conversations. Quiet evenings by the observation window. This time, however, something feels different. The crew has changed, not physically, something deeper. They left Earth as explorers. They return as people who have stood on another world. That experience changes the way they see everything. Weeks pass, then months. One ordinary morning, someone notices a tiny blue light ahead. At first, it looks no different from the thousands of stars surrounding it, but everyone knows exactly what it is. Earth, home. Each day it grows brighter, larger, more beautiful. Soon the familiar colors become visible. Deep blue oceans, white clouds, hints of green and brown across the continents. From this distance, Earth almost glows. Not because it is special in the universe, but because it is special to us. It is the only home every human being has ever truly known. The astronauts cannot stop looking at it. Funny, isn't it? When they left Earth, they were excited to reach Mars. Now they are just as excited to return. Perhaps that is another lesson of exploration. Adventure is wonderful. Coming home is wonderful too. As Earth fills the windows, memories begin returning. The smell of rain, ocean waves, fresh fruit, birdsong, trees moving in the wind, children laughing in school playgrounds. The sound of leaves beneath your shoes during autumn. Even little things people usually ignore suddenly seem precious. One astronaut smiles and says, "I never thought I would miss ordinary weather." Everyone laughs. Even cloudy days suddenly sound luxurious after months on Mars. The spacecraft enters Earth's atmosphere. Outside, bright orange light surrounds the cabin. Unlike the thin air of Mars, Earth's atmosphere is thick and welcoming. The spacecraft slows smoothly. Parachutes open, the ground rises to meet them, then comes one soft landing. Home. As the astronauts step outside, something feels different immediately. Gravity. Their bodies suddenly feel heavy again. Walking takes effort. The breeze touches their faces. Fresh air fills their lungs. It smells alive. There are birds singing somewhere nearby. Grass moves gently in the wind. The sky is bright blue. After months beneath the dusty skies of Mars, Earth's colors almost seem impossible. Too bright, too full of life. The astronauts pause for a moment, not because they are tired, because they are grateful. Looking back on the journey, they realize something important. The mission was never only about reaching Mars. It was about understanding Earth. Sometimes we must travel very far away to truly appreciate what has always been close. Mars gave us knowledge. Earth gives us life. Both are gifts. And now humanity stands at the beginning of a new chapter. Mars will not be the final destination. One day, people may visit the icy moons of Jupiter. Perhaps the mysterious oceans beneath the frozen surface of Europa, maybe the lakes of Titan, or worlds we have not even discovered yet. The stars themselves may remain far away for now. But history has taught us something remarkable. Every impossible journey begins as someone's dream. The moon was once impossible. Flying was once impossible. Crossing the oceans was once impossible. Then one day someone tried. Perhaps the greatest lesson of our journey is this: the universe is not calling us because it wants to be conquered. It is inviting us to learn, to wonder, to explore with kindness, to carry our curiosity wherever we go. As our story gently comes to an end, imagine one final scene. Far above the earth, the night sky stretches across the world. Among thousands of stars, a small red light quietly shines. Mars, the same little planet that inspired ancient astronomers, storytellers, scientists, dreamers, and explorers for thousands of years. It is still there, still waiting, still reminding every child who looks up at the night sky that there is always another mystery beyond the horizon. And perhaps that is the greatest wisdom of all. No matter how much we discover, there will always be another question, another journey, another dream. So tonight, as you drift towards sleep, let your imagination travel gently between two worlds. Carry a little piece of Earth with you. Carry a little piece of Mars as well. And remember that the greatest adventures do not begin with rockets. They begin with one quiet thought. I wonder what is waiting out there. Good night, and just like that, our journey is coming to a gentle end. If you have been with me from the very beginning, thank you for traveling all the way from Earth to Mars and back again. That is quite an impressive trip for one evening. And the best part: no jet lag. As we settle into the final chapter, there is nothing left to solve. No more checklists, no more rocket launches, no more difficult landings, only a quiet sky. And a peaceful moment to look back at everything we have shared. When our story began, Earth slowly disappeared behind us. It started as the only world we had ever known. A place filled with oceans, forests, cities, mountains, music, laughter, and countless everyday moments that often pass unnoticed. Then we left it behind, not forever. Just long enough to see it with new eyes. That tiny blue planet became a shining marble floating in endless darkness. From far away, it looked fragile, beautiful, almost too beautiful to be real. Then Mars welcomed us, not with crowds, not with grand celebrations, not with mysterious aliens offering us tea, although I still think that would have made an excellent first contact. Instead, Mars welcomed us with silence, a silence so deep that it almost became part of the landscape itself. We walked across ancient deserts. We looked at volcanoes taller than any mountain on Earth. We followed the paths of rivers that disappeared billions of years ago. We searched for tiny clues hidden inside rocks. We imagined what future homes might look like beneath the red sky, and somewhere along the way, something interesting happened. Mars stopped feeling like a distant dream. It became a real place. That is one of the wonderful things about learning. The unknown slowly becomes familiar. A name on a map becomes a place. A bright light in the sky becomes another world. A mystery becomes the beginning of understanding. Of course, Mars still holds countless secrets. Scientists continue discovering new things every year. Perhaps future explorers will find underground lakes. Perhaps they will discover evidence of ancient life. Perhaps they will build the first permanent settlement. Or perhaps Mars will surprise everyone with something nobody has imagined yet. The universe has a habit of doing that, just when humans start feeling clever. The universe quietly smiles and says, "Oh, you have only just begun." That is one reason science is so beautiful. There is always another question waiting, another puzzle, another mystery. Some people think science takes away wonder. I have always felt the opposite. The more we learn, the more wonderful the universe becomes. Knowing how stars shine does not make them less beautiful. Knowing how planets form does not make them less magical. If anything, understanding adds another layer of appreciation. Reality is often more amazing than imagination. And imagination is already pretty amazing. Throughout our journey, we also met another important traveling companion, curiosity. It never carried a suitcase. It never needed a rocket seat. Yet somehow it came with us every step of the way. Curiosity was there when ancient people looked at the red light in the night sky. It was there when Galileo pointed his telescope toward Mars. It was there when Bengali writers filled blank pages with impossible adventures. It was there when engineers built spacecraft. And it will be there when future children ask questions that nobody alive today can answer. Curiosity quietly connects every generation. One person asks a question. The next person searches for the answer. Someone else asks an even bigger question. That chain never really ends. Perhaps that is humanity's greatest adventure, not reaching one destination, but continuing the journey. There is something comforting about that thought. No matter how much we discover, there will always be more waiting beyond the next horizon. Another planet, another moon, another star, another idea. The story is never truly finished. Tonight, though, our chapter is complete. Imagine yourself standing outside on a peaceful evening. There are no city lights. The air is cool, the sky is perfectly clear. Thousands of stars stretch across the darkness. Somewhere among them shines Mars, a tiny reddish light, quiet, patient. Exactly where countless generations have watched it from before us. Perhaps someone 1,000 years from now will stand beneath the same sky. They might look toward Mars and smile, knowing that people once dreamed of reaching it. Perhaps by then, children will visit Mars the way families today visit another country. Perhaps schools will organize science trips between planets. Imagine forgetting your homework on Earth. That would be a very awkward excuse. I promise, teacher. It's only about 225 million kilometers away. Some excuses may never work. As your eyes grow heavier, let your mind drift gently through space one last time. Picture our little spacecraft moving silently between the stars. No rushing, no noise, only the soft hum of its engines. Earth glows behind it, Mars shines ahead. The sun watches quietly from far away. Everything feels peaceful, everything feels calm. Take one slow breath. Imagine floating weightlessly, free from worries for just a little while. The universe is enormous, yet tonight it somehow feels warm, friendly, almost like an old story waiting to be told again. Maybe that is what bedtime stories have always done. They remind us that the world is larger than our daily routines. They gently open a small window into places we may never visit. Then, before we fall asleep, they quietly bring us home again. If you happen to dream tonight, perhaps your dreams will borrow a little color from Mars. Maybe you will walk across soft red sand beneath a sky glowing with sunset colors. Maybe you will stand beside an ancient crater while the stars sparkle above you. Or maybe you will simply find yourself back on Earth, looking upward with fresh eyes, grateful that such beautiful worlds exist at all. Whatever you dream, I hope it is peaceful. I hope it is kind. And I hope it reminds you that curiosity is one of the gentlest gifts we carry through life. It asks us to keep learning, to keep wondering, to keep looking up. The stars are still there. Mars is still there, and tomorrow night they will quietly rise again, just as they have for millions of years. Thank you for sharing this journey. Thank you for bringing your imagination along for the ride. Now it is time to let the universe continue its quiet dance without us for a little while. Close your eyes, relax your mind. Let the worries of the day drift away like tiny stars fading into the distance. Sleep peacefully beneath the same sky that watched ancient dreamers, inspired great storytellers, guided brave explorers, and quietly led us all the way to the Red Planet. Until our next bedtime adventure, good night, sleep well, and keep wondering.